We're back here at the Excel spreadsheet containing a subset of the locked interrogation reports. And this subset, again, as a reminder, consists entirely of the events generated for cards being applied against the door lock and or internal commands over the network and other little various types of commands, but it does not include the open, close, and deadbolt activity. If we squish this all the way down and look at the activity per day, we can see that on the 25th there was some activity, but very little by paddock, as indicated by the small blob of red here. On the 26th, 27th, 28th, there was essentially no activity. Okay, we got how many entries? We got one entry on the 26th by paddock. We got one on the 27th, one on the 28th. Other than that, it's either staff or the Invisalign software talking to the unit. For example, on the let's blow this up. On the 28th, the only activity by paddock in terms of cards, i.e. gaining access, occurred at 9:53 p.m. in which his card was accepted by the lock and he gained entry to the room. Other than that, a readout was done at 7:30 a.m. by the system to read who knows what from the lock. Again, on the 27th, paddock entered the room at 7:18, and the only other activity was at 4:32 p.m. in the afternoon, and that was by staff or housekeeping. That was Gamboa coming in to do various things like clean the room. So, shrinking it back out, we see that almost all the activity occurs in the last 3 days of his visit. And that activity on the 25th is mostly due to, interrogations from the Invisalign software and or the housekeeping doing their thing. But on the 28th, we see an increase. 28th? No, let's see. 25, 26, or 7. That's the 29th. Well, that's when he checked into room 134, because over here you can see the first occurrence of paddock here as check-in at room 134. I guess I should blow that up. Yeah, guest card applied against room 134, access granted. That's the first occurrence of a card against 134. However, here on the 30th is a rather unique situation. Now, there's plenty of other information elsewhere to help us along in deciphering what this is, but we're going to focus exclusively on the card activity and leave it at that for the evening. But basically, we see that on the 29th, the last occurrence of any activity by paddock occurred at 9:38, and he was granted access to the room. And sometime later, a guy came along and tried to gain access to room 135, but was denied. Again, on the 30th, somebody else by the name of Thornton came along and tried to gain access to 134, was denied. And then at 6:03, paddock came up, and you can see that there's two entries for 6:03, one against room 135, one against room 134. Because of the resolution here, we don't really know which came first. But what we can see is that the same card was used, i.e. the first occurrence of the purple card, and it was applied against room 135 and 134. Against room 135, it said, wrong card. Against room 134, it said, deadbolt locked. Okay, so based upon this, we know that the card was issued against 134, but that it would not give him access to 134 because the room was locked. Okay, so he tries it. A scenario, my interpretation is that somewhere along the line, Paddock realized that he didn't have his cards. They were either left in the room when he left, or he left them at home, or he gave them to somebody or something. But that on his way to the room that morning, because we know from the FIT report and the other things that Paddock made a trip from Mesquite a few hours earlier. He left the hotel, then a couple hours later came back, and he arrived approximately 6 a.m. in the morning hauling two rollies with a laptop on top of one and a white bag on top of the other. And he, in my scenario, in my interpretation, he picked up a set of cards at VIP for room 134. He rode the elevator up. He took that card. He applied it against room 134. But room 134 he had left deadbolted because he had exited room 135. So the light on the lock said, and he said, oh. He walks on over to room 135, and he uses the key against it. It says, So here's Paddock hauling 2 suitcases and 2 bags at 6 a.m. in the morning, roughly, and he can't gain access to either room. Well, what's he do? He panics. And so for the next 11 entries, he applies the card that he had just gotten from VIP against both room 135 and 134 for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 total times he used that card in less than and he did it for 2 minutes. Okay, that's what we call a panic attack. Paddock hauling guns and ammunition. I don't know exactly. Well, actually, I do know in this time. These are smaller bags, and they probably either have ammunition or paraphernalia. And he comes up. He just visited and just received a card from down below. He comes up. He can't get access to either room, and he goes, oh, fuck. So he takes his bags. He hauls them back down. He goes back to VIP. God knows what conversation he had with the person there, but it's a different person this time because it was he's going to get another set of cards issued by a different person, and he's going to get a card for 135. And then he's going to take his bags, trot back up the elevator, walk back down the hall, and this time, since he had talked personally, well, I don't know. You know, there's a lot of different scenarios here. This isn't the only scenario that's valid, but he's got this new set of cards now, 2 new cards, in fact. He got 2 purple cards and 2 orange ones, and now he applies the orange one against room 135, and it's accepted. And a whole sequence of events occur after that. As you can see here, all of the cards are used in this massive attempt to either validate the cards, figure out what the cards were for, or to figure out what the heck was going on. And that leads to a whole nother interesting story. But from this Lock Interrogation Report alone, you can see that there's a significant event here that happened that led to the acquisition of 2 new groups of cards, all within the space of 9 minutes. That's pretty quick. You know, it takes, you know, like what, 60, 70 seconds to walk the hall, 45 seconds to ride the elevator, 10 seconds to get to VIP, and you got to repeat the whole process twice. So, you know, he's really pushing it here. My best guess at what happened was he was driving back to Mandalay Bay, realized he didn't have his cards. He called in to the VIP counter and said, hey, I need a set of cards for my rooms. And they just automatically gave him one for room 134. And he got there. He just picked up the cards real swiftly, went up to the room, and he assumed they could get back in, either that or forgot that he had deadbolted it. But whatever the case is, room 134 was deadbolted. He couldn't get in there. The card was issued for 134. It couldn't be used on 135. And now he's got to go back down. Now imagine this. You have a grand total of 8 cards issued. And it's 3 different people who issued the cards. And you're plotting the biggest mass murder in history. I think there's some exposure there. So you can imagine the adrenaline flow, the embarrassment, and the risk of exposure that he was facing because of what happened. And I'll get into what may have happened and what actually followed that yields tremendous amount of insight into the interpretation of the Lock Interrogation Report. Because of this one event here, we have a whole different change in Paddock's attitude towards guest cards. And it wasn't until late in the afternoon of the 1st that he settled back down. So that's one big reveal. Now, I have Hunter to thank for most of the work on this revelation. We both had observed that there was some tremendous problems with Paddock and his cards, and we had both observed that there was something to be discovered here, but it was Hunter who took the time to analyze all the times traveling down the hall, going up the elevator, and this sequence of events and the images, which I'll, in the next segment, give a complete breakdown, or in an upcoming video, I'll give a complete breakdown of pictures of him coming and going and how it all fits together. But for the moment, the big takeaway here is that there are 4 sets of, we can tell from this Lock Interrogation Report that there's 4 sets of cards, 4 unique times at which he acquired cards, 4 trips to the VIP counter, and most likely 2 cards were issued at each time for a grand total of 8 cards. So let's go back to the picture of those cards. Do I have them up? No, of course not. Let's see here, I've forgotten where they are. So I'll pull open my little trusty graph here. And since I know there's a lot of images, not that one. Must be this one. Card keys, no. This one, there we go, all cards. We'll go back to this. This is how the FIT report says the cards were laid out. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't see, except for the fact there are 2 behind, they're kind of segregated, I don't see any rhyme or reason to that. And imagine you getting ready to go out, and you having to determine which card you're going to take. I don't see any markings on them. I don't see any way of, except for this one that's inside there, any way of distinguishing these one card from the next. So card management was an issue for Paddock. The man who was methodical, the man who had planned everything out, the man who was in control of everything, the man who had meticulously loaded guns, who had bought them, had placed them, had maintained them, had brought these suitcases up, but yet he can't manage these cards. So Hunter and I had numerous discussions. We had close to 24 different videos between the 2 of us talking about this very issue. And there was a lot of tinfoil hat stuff that we talked about, because after all, prior to us discovering, the elevator, the panic session, which we call it the panic session. Oh my God, I'm locked out of my room, I'm panicked. And an accurate count of all these cards, we were kind of just guessing in the dark, because in the Lock Interrogation Report, the activity on these days just looks, and actually, for the next day too, it just looks kind of bizarre. But once we understood what happened here, then it became very apparent that each time Paddock left, he needed to make sure that he had the right cards, and he needed to make sure that he could get back into his room. And with that, I'll leave it, and we'll catch you in the next segment.